A 7-foot-tall fence may not be too little, but it is certainly too late. Workers installed the barrier around the Capitol a day after a mob of domestic terrorists who call themselves patriots caused a deadly riot in the name of Donald Trump. Removal from office, the growing calls from both Democrats and Republicans to get President Trump out before he can cause any more damage, even with only 13 days left in office. Many in Congress putting the blame directly on Trump for the melee, his closest allies breaking from him while multiple cabinet members and White House officials resign. The new pictures and video show the attack unfold, piecing together the timeline minute by minute. What we're learning about the identities of those in the mob and concerns that the violence is empowering far-right extremists and white nationalists to commit further acts. Security failure examining what didn't happen that could have prevented the deadly violence. How were Capitol Police so unprepared for a protest they knew was coming? Double standard, and why so many Americans are outraged over the lack of a police response after a summer when many peaceful protesters met with sheer force. And while Washington is in an uproar, more Americans died today than any other day since the Civil War. More than 4,000 lives lost in the last 24 hours from the coronavirus and its relentless spread across this country. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Democracy dies in darkness. That phrase was coined by a judge in Detroit, writing an opinion about the dangers of secrecy in government. So in that same vein, tonight we wanted to offer some illumination. Behind me are the faces of all of the 147 Republican lawmakers, 8 senators, and 139 members of the House who voted to overturn election results in the middle of the night on one of the darkest days in this country's history. Their objections came just a few hours after anarchists and thugs stormed the U.S. Capitol, and despite the fact that the results had been certified by all 50 states, that dozens of judges found no evidence of fraud, and that the results were confirmed by multiple election officials on both sides of the aisle as a free and fair election. But just before dawn, and on the very floor anarchists briefly took over hours earlier, the other 387 members of Congress confirmed Joe Biden as the next president of the United States, a vote Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell called the most important in his 36-year career. Tonight, coupled with anger and sadness, questions remain about how scenes like this were allowed to happen, a noose hanging from a makeshift gallows, and why Capitol Police, with a budget of roughly $500 million, seemingly let it all play out. The president has not spoken publicly in more than 24 hours, though a White House spokesperson has condemned the rioters. Trump has not offered anything close to a condemnation. Many in his own party now accuse him of inciting this behavior, and members of his own cabinet have begun to resign. Tonight, there's even talk among Republicans of if this president, with just 13 days left in his presidency, should be removed from office. Our Jonathan Karl leads us off.
We're coming for you!
As his supporters swarmed the Capitol building, President Trump was in the White House watching it all unfold on television. ABC News has learned that the mayor of Washington called the Pentagon pleading for help. Desperate, she then reached out to the president's advisors. At the same time, congressional leaders made the request to Vice President Mike Pence. But Trump praised his supporters even as he told them to go home.
So go home. We love you. You're very special.
Tonight, the White House press secretary said the president condemns the violence, but Democrats in Congress are calling on Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove the president by a vote of his cabinet because he is mentally unfit.
And by inciting sedition, as he did yesterday, he must be removed from office. While it's only 13 days left, any day can be a horror show for America.
If that doesn't happen, Democrats say he should be impeached, an option some Republicans in Congress are privately discussing as well, according to multiple Republican sources. And members of the president's cabinet have had detailed conversations about the 25th Amendment, according to sources familiar with the discussions, although it is considered unlikely to happen. Today, former Chief of Staff John Kelly said he would vote to remove his old boss.
I think the cabinet should meet and discuss this. What happened on Capitol Hill yesterday is a direct result of his poisoning the minds of people with the lies and the frauds.
Today, one cabinet official resigned, Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao, wife of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. She said what happened yesterday, quote, deeply troubled me in a way that I simply cannot set aside. Former members of the Trump administration placed blame squarely on President Trump. Former Attorney General Bill Barr, a staunch Trump loyalist before he left office 2 weeks ago, said, quote, orchestrating a mob to pressure Congress is inexcusable. The president's conduct yesterday was a betrayal of his office and his supporters. And scathing words from former Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, who said after Joe Biden is inaugurated on January 20th, quote, Mr. Trump will deservedly be a man without a country. There's also been a reckoning among Trump loyalists in Congress. Outgoing Senator Kelly Loeffler had planned to object to Biden's electoral votes, but changed her mind after the Capitol riot.
There can be no disagreement that upholding democracy is the only path to preserving our republic. I yield the floor.
As the senators applauded her decision to abandon the president, so did Vice President Pence. Still, more than half of House Republicans voted to overturn the election, and so did a handful of Republican senators, including Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, who was seen raising a fist in solidarity with Trump supporters shortly before they stormed the Capitol. Today, other Republicans called their actions shameful.
You have some senators who, for political advantage, were giving false hope to their supporters. These senators, as insurrectionists, literally stormed the Capitol, were sending out fundraising emails.
Jonathan Karl joins us now from the White House. John, if impeachment or invoking the 25th Amendment may both prove difficult, with just 13 days left in Trump's term, what other possible scenarios are there on how these final days could play out?
Well, one thing that several people close to the president and Republicans on Capitol Hill have talked about is to essentially try to box the president out, to basically not deal with him and to deal with the vice president instead, as if the vice president were an acting president. Of course, that's not how our system works. But right now, congressional leaders are simply not talking to the President of the United States. I know for a fact that all day today, the four top leaders in Congress have not spoken to the President. So they are effectively, dealing directly with the Vice President and hoping that nothing worse happens. But nobody I've talked to has ruled out either the 25th Amendment being invoked or impeachment. Those are Republicans not ruling that out, which is really tells you how extraordinary this situation is.
Right. Day after day, it just seems like unprecedented territory. Jonathan Karl, our thanks to you.
Thank you.
The scenes from the nation's capital yesterday, really surreal to watch unfold. Our Martha Raddatz was on the ground throughout the day, and tonight brings us new images and details of what went on in the halls of the Capitol.
This is the moment the siege began. A violent mob of Trump supporters swarming the entrance to the Capitol grounds. Overwhelming police officers knocking barricades to the ground and surging towards the seat of American democracy. A Trump flag waving in the air. USA! They converged on the Capitol, scaling the scaffolding, surging ahead amid clouds of tear gas, taunting, screaming, swearing, hurtling themselves towards police, again quickly overpowering them, smashing windows, climbing inside, and flooding the hallways of the Capitol. A reporter from ITV in the thick of the melee.
What's the purpose of storming Congress itself?
Because they work for us. They don't get to steal it from us.
They broke into the office of the Speaker of the House, holding up the sign they had smashed. This man carrying off the Speaker's podium itself. And Richard Barnett of Arkansas putting his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk and then making off with an envelope with her letterhead.
I didn't steal it. I'll put a quarter on her desk, even though she ain't worth it.
For Congress members themselves, hours of sheer terror. Pelosi and Vice President Mike Pence whisked to safety. Lawmakers barricaded inside the chamber. Officers with guns drawn, trying to keep the rioters out. Members ultimately filing out, rushing down the stairs, some wearing gas masks over their heads to protect themselves, seeking shelter in their offices.
We heard them outside. We were concerned they were going to break down the door. And I picked up a baseball bat. That's all I had to protect myself in the event they broke into the office.
As the violence and looting continues, one of the women was shot dead by police as she tried to climb through a window. Tonight, we are learning her name, Ashley Babbitt, an Air Force veteran. It is still hard to believe that it was the President of the United States himself who sent this crowd to the Capitol, inciting the day of rage.
We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
But Trump did not go with his followers. He went back to the White House to watch the events on television. He had hoped to prevent the inevitable, Congress counting the electoral votes and certifying Joe Biden as winner of the election. At 8 p.m., with smoke still hanging in the air, Congress went back into session, determined to complete the people's business.
Let's get back to work.
Lawmakers clearly shaken, Utah Senator Mitt Romney unsparing as he denounced the chaos as an insurrection incited by the President of the United States.
We gather due to a selfish man's injured pride. The best way we can show respect for the voters who are upset is by telling them the truth.
Lindsey Graham once denounced Trump only to embrace and defend him at every turn. But a violent throng of Trump supporters storming the Capitol was a bridge too far.
All I can say is count me out. Enough is enough. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are lawfully elected and will become the president and the vice president of the United States on January the 20th.
And in the wee hours, Vice President Mike Pence made it official.
The votes for President of the United States are as follows. Joseph R. Biden, Jr. of the state of Delaware has received 306 votes. Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida has received 232 votes.
Even though the physical mess may be cleaned up, a much larger mess still remains. Our thanks to Martha Raddatz for that. And joining us now is California Congresswoman Maxine Waters. Congresswoman, thank you so much for your time. Now, the president himself has not spoken out forcibly to condemn the rioters and anarchists. Your colleagues Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are both calling for Vice President Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment. If that does not happen, they've threatened impeachment. Is impeaching the president in just 13 days really a realistic option?
Well, let me just say that not only the members of Congress and Leader Pelosi are just absolutely outraged and horrified by the attack on these from these mobs yesterday. And yes, they're going to try everything that they possibly can to make him accountable. And so, yes, attempting to try to invoke the 25th Amendment is something that should be tried. The impeachment that is being talked about, if there are ways by which to get the impeachment resolution up on the floor without having to go back through committees and do the kind of organizing that was done when it was tried, then, perhaps that can be done. I support whatever's attempted to hold this president accountable. Yes, it's going to be difficult with such a short time frame, but I think the American people want to see a response. They want to know that we are as outraged as they are and that we're attempting to make him accountable.
And you've said that you had an hour-long conversation with the Capitol Chief of Police 4 days ago where he assured you that they were ready. What happened?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This conversation that I had with him was a result of my bringing up the issue in the Democratic caucus meeting, where I thought, we needed to know more about what the security plan was. And so Zoe Lofgren, who is a chair of our administrative committee, had him call me And this is when I had the hour-long conversation with him. The first thing I said to him is, you have to make sure that they do not occupy the plaza. And he said, don't worry about that. We've got that covered. They certainly will not. I raised about, 9 or 10 other questions with him, including, whether or not he was going to secure the buildings and perhaps have police on top of the buildings, because oftentimes that's where snipers go and attempt to assassinate or to target individuals. He said, well, they can't get up on top of the building. They would have to go through the building in order to get on top. But then, of course, we saw that they scaled the outside and they broke the windows and knocked over the doors and got into the building and was in the chambers of the House and the Senate, statutory a room that we have with all the statues in it, a statutory hall, we call it. And so, yes, we had this conversation. It was lengthy. I questioned him about not only the plaza and, securing the buildings, but also questioned him about whether or not he knew what violent or terrorist organizations may be coming. I told him, and he should have known, that the Proud Boys were already in town, and whether or not he knew what other organizations would be in, and would they attempt to keep out some of these domestic terrorist organizations, such as what we saw in South Carolina, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he did not have the names of the groups. He said they have a process by which they do permitting, and they do not have to identify as a group. An individual can come in and fill out the paperwork and get assigned to an acceptable location for protesting. If they don't ask for a location, they will choose one for them. I questioned him about whether or not they would block off the streets in front of the Cannon Building and the Longworth Building. He told me no, they were not going to do that. That the Second Amendment rights had to be First Amendment rights. Had to be protected. I asked him about guns and whether or not some of these individuals who come from gun carry states could possibly be bringing guns in to this protest. He said, well, if we see a gun, if they display a gun, we will arrest them. I was a little bit uneasy about that answer. I got no indication that any surveillance or intelligence was being done, but he did say and assure me that they had it under control to the point where even if there were opposing organizations, the police would be stationed on the grassy area in ways that they could prevent any confrontations, on and on and on. He was a police chief, and he said, we got it. We got it under control.
And lastly, Congresswoman, I read something yesterday, and it really struck me and has stayed with me, written by a black person who said, we are not asking you to shoot them like you shoot us. We are asking you to not shoot us like you don't shoot them. You've certainly been in Congress 30 years, seen a lot. What are your thoughts on the hypocrisy and double standard that so many are talking about in our society as far as if the rioters yesterday had been black, how the outcome most likely would have been much different?
Well, I tweeted something similar to that, and I basically tweeted, if this had been Black Lives Matter, acting in the way that the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys and the white supremacists had stormed our Capitol, what do you think would have happened? Or do you think, in essence, they would have gotten away with it? And I got the kind of responses where, everyone was saying, of course, we know. They said it in so many ways. Blood would be all over the place. They would be killed. They would be shot. Everybody believes and knows that blacks are treated differently, even when they're peacefully protesting. And so we also know that whites feel more comfortable in their protests that they will not be shot and killed. That's why they were so brazen going into our chambers. And the one that went into Nancy Pelosi's office and sat in the chair, on and on and on, they don't think for 1 minute that they're going to be killed in the way that we know that blacks possibly could be.
Representative Maxine Waters, we thank you so much for your time. Glad you're safe.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And we now have some breaking news. President Trump has just released a video about yesterday's riot. Let's watch.
I would like to begin by addressing the heinous attack on the United States Capitol. Like all Americans, I am outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem. I immediately deployed the National Guard and federal law enforcement to secure the building and expel the intruders. America is and must always be a nation of law and order. The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defiled the seat of American democracy. To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. And to those who broke the law, you will pay. We have just been through an intense election and emotions are high, but now tempers must be cooled and calm restored. We must get on with the business of America. My campaign vigorously pursued every legal avenue to contest the election results. My only goal was to ensure the integrity of the vote. In so doing, I was fighting to defend American democracy. I continue to strongly believe that we must reform our election laws to verify the identity and eligibility of all voters and to ensure faith and confidence in all future elections. Now Congress has certified the results. A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power. This moment calls for healing and reconciliation. 2020 has been a challenging time for our people. A menacing pandemic has upended the lives of our citizens, isolated millions in their homes, damaged our economy, and claimed countless lives. Defeating this pandemic and rebuilding the greatest economy on earth will require all of us working together. It will require a renewed emphasis on the civic values of patriotism, faith, charity, community, and family. We must revitalize the sacred bonds of love and loyalty that bind us together as one national family. To the citizens of our country, serving as your president has been the honor of my lifetime. And to all of my wonderful supporters, I know you are disappointed, but I also want you to know that our incredible journey is only just beginning. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
Joining us now is senior editorial producer John Santucci. John, what a sharp contrast with the video that the president released yesterday while the protesters were still in the Capitol and now. Nothing in this speech just now about how the election had been stolen. He's only talking about a smooth transition in a conciliatory tone. Can you give us a sense of any kind of insight that you have as to the kind of pressure that he had on him in order to make this statement, and if it's too little too late?
Well, definitely intense pressure, Lindsay. Good evening. This has been all day that people from last night, remember, we had several phases of Trump reacting. We had the tweet, the first statement that came out a little past 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon as protesters were storming across the Capitol that aides and advisors and folks up on Capitol said was not enough. Then we had the video that everyone again said was not enough. To think that it took almost 24 hours for this president to come out and do something, as we have seen, this has not been a great day for Donald Trump. A member of his cabinet has resigned. Almost a half a dozen administration officials have resigned. Our sources tell ABC News that other people are considering resigning still within the White House and the Trump broader administration. But he has been under intense pressure to do this. I am told by senior sources that throughout the day he was being lobbied to do this. Ivanka Trump, the president's daughter and senior advisor, she works in the office right above the Oval Office, Lindsay. She was one of the people pushing the president to get out there and do something, because let's not forget, when Donald Trump leaves office, the children, the Trump organization, there are so many things that will be impacted here because of the damage that was done yesterday. They know that. The First Family is not stupid. They have become very, from novice political neophytes to where they've grown over the last several years. They know. They were getting the phone calls yesterday saying, you've got to do something. You've got to get out there. You've got to get down there and tell your father to fix this. And I think that's what we're seeing here in this video tonight. But to your second question, Lindsay, it is most certainly too little too late. And the one thing among many that is missing from that video, no mention or at least a recognition of Joe Biden. His name is missing from those 2 minutes and 41 seconds that we hear President Trump speaking tonight.
And so you believe that it's the children ultimately who still do have his ear and able to really influence? Because, I mean, interestingly, his children were there yesterday as he was encouraging and egging on his supporters, telling them to be strong, encouraging them to be forceful, to march there to the Capitol. And yet in this video that we just heard him there, he's saying he's outraged by the result. But you feel that it's the children who ultimately have the influence?
Well, at this point, Lindsay, there's not many people left. Remember, we have been reporting over the last several weeks that the number of staffers physically in the building around the president is dwindling. We've reported over the last 24 hours that very few people have been showing up to work. Again, as I mentioned earlier, more people are resigning. And Donald Trump, at the end of the day, believes in family and believes in loyalty. We've talked a lot about that over the course of this insane scenario that we've been witnessing take over Washington. And at the end of the day, Donald Trump's family is his closest advisors. They will be the only ones with him. They are blood after this is all over. So they had to be the ones to go to their father and say, you need to do this. And as far as the White House inner circle is concerned, as I mentioned, it's just gotten smaller. Mark Meadows, Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel, only two aides, Lindsay, were physically in the Oval Office yesterday pleading with the president to do something because they were the ones taking calls from Capitol Hill. President Trump, though he spoke to some people, we know leader Kevin McCarthy, because he said it on air yesterday with George Stephanopoulos, did get through to the president. Many people that were trying to call the president could not get through. Chris Christie also told us that he had tried for almost 25 minutes to get through to the White House, to implore the president to do something, to get the National Guard troops out there. And that's the one thing, Lindsay, listen, like everything else that we've reported on for Donald Trump over the years, it's going to require a fact check. What he says right at the top of the video, that he immediately sent the National Guard, that is simply not true. Our sources emphatically have told us that the president rebuffed the efforts to send the National Guard. It took almost 2 hours after the House was closed down, after it was sealed off from the protesters.
And it sounds like that it was Mike Pence that ultimately did that. It was the vice president that gave that signal.
That's exactly right. Now, when I say the president rebuffed it, they had to convince him out of it, but it wasn't that Trump put the pen to paper ordering it to go up there. He just didn't stand in the way. Pence, as you just said, was the one to actually make the troops take over the Capitol and get this situation under control.
John Santucci reporting in for us. Thanks as always, John.
Thank you,
Law
Lindsay.
enforcement says that they are working to hunt down those rioters who stormed the Capitol building, but they're facing some tough scrutiny over the stunning security failure and how it was permitted, even after signs for weeks that some attending the rally could be a threat. Here's ABC's Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas.
Tonight, federal agents and police releasing these images in a desperate hunt for the people seen inside the Capitol during the siege.
USA! USA!
And tonight, we're learning just how dangerous the situation was. More than 80 people arrested, 5 firearms recovered, including a military-style assault rifle, 2 powerful functioning pipe bombs, and 11 Molotov cocktails, which authorities say were, quote, ready to go. And there may be national security implications. Federal prosecutors saying today a trove of items stolen, including potentially sensitive information. The new details coming as there are tough questions about what was, by all accounts, a near total collapse of security.
The men and women of the Metropolitan Police Department went into a situation that was already out of control.
There were posts warning of violence on social media, on right-wing websites, from groups like the Boogaloo and the Proud Boys. The Anti-Defamation League put out a release earlier this week outlining specific threats to members of Congress. As early as December 19th, President Trump encouraging supporters to come, tweeting, "Be there, we'll be wild." More than 50 officers were hurt clashing with the mob. But there are also videos that appear to show officers moving the barricades aside.
Oh, there we go.
Another one in a rioter's selfie. Bipartisan outrage. Senate Majority Leader McConnell saying steps have to be taken to address the, quote, shocking failures in the Capitol's security posture and protocols.
Pierre Thomas joins us now. Pierre, those weapons found show that this actually could have been much worse than what unfolded ultimately. What concerns does law enforcement have about the days and weeks ahead, especially with inauguration less than 2 weeks away at this point?
Lindsay, the concern is very real. Law enforcement officials say that they will be deploying an additional 4,000 National Guard to the city by the weekend. Law enforcement is taking no chances with the inauguration coming up, Lindsay.
Our thanks to Pierre Thomas. And joining us now is the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt, who wrote an op-ed in Time magazine entitled "White Supremacism is a Domestic Terror Threat That Will Outlast Trump." Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us. Now, in your op-ed, you write, while the attack was shocking, it was not surprising. In the 5 years since Donald Trump descended the escalator at Trump Tower, we have seen an unprecedented and abnormal rise of violent right-wing extremism in the U.S. and beyond. The president is leaving office in 13 days, meaning that he's going to lose that bully pulpit. If it's his words that help inflame this situation, why do you think that this threat won't just go away when he does?
Well, white supremacy existed before Donald Trump, and it will continue after Donald Trump leaves office in 2 weeks. I think the challenge we have is that he has so amplified this issue. He has literally given free rein to these individuals and emboldened extremists across the board. White supremacists, anti-government activists, Boogaloo enthusiasts, QAnon, conspiratorial theorists. All of them he has encouraged. He egged them on at the steps of the Capitol yesterday, to the point where they literally stormed the seat of our democracy. What's worrisome is that we're already seeing chatter tonight about how white supremacists and extremists want to disrupt the inauguration in 2 weeks. So indeed, I'm afraid that you can't put this genie back in the bottle quite so easily.
Right, yeah, many people have been concerned now about the inauguration. And this certainly, though, is not just an American problem, as evidenced by that horrific mosque attack in New Zealand where 51 people were killed. So wouldn't you agree that this is much bigger than President Trump?
It is much bigger than President Trump. I'm optimistic that President Biden, one of the first things he will do, as clear as day on his inauguration, will be articulate that this is a global terror threat and leverage the full force of the federal government. As you said, it's a domestic and global problem. We need the Justice Department and the State Department, the FBI and the CIA, because there are links. You know, there were European white supremacists marching in Charlottesville. I'm guessing we will find out they were here yesterday as well. So we've got to realize this is a terror threat and needs to be treated as such.
Now, we believe that many of those rioters who ransacked Congress are now leaving Washington. Would you recommend that they be charged, or have these groups been so emboldened that that might not even move the needle at this point?
No. I'm glad you asked. Far from it. This was an act of terror, and every individual who participated, who stormed the Capitol, who desecrated this, our sort of temple of democracy, they should be identified, arrested, and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The only way that we can turn back the tide on this violent extremism is by reversing what Donald Trump has done. I mean, he is responsible for this, for elevating these individuals. So what we need to do is to say definitively, through policy, let alone through statements, that violent white supremacy has no place in the public conversation, that those who engage in these activities will face the full force of the law, and that America is no place for hate.
And beyond that, specifically, any other thoughts as far as how the Biden and Harris administration should tackle this?
Well, again, I think you're going to want to see a full investigation of what happened on Capitol Hill, because indeed law enforcement and some of those Capitol Hill police officers fought bravely, and they were assaulted brazenly and in broad daylight by this mob in this organized attack. At the same time, I don't understand why the federal government wasn't better prepared. I cannot grasp how the way that law enforcement responds to a Black Lives Matter protest, they basically were not nearly as well prepared for yesterday. But I should say one other thing. Your government can't solve this problem alone. We need a whole of society approach. And social media companies need to step up. Facebook and Twitter should ban Donald Trump, not for 12 hours or 2 weeks. They should ban him permanently, because access to those platforms is a privilege. And I got to tell you, inciting violence against the U.S. government, I think you lose that privilege, and he should lose it permanently.
Jonathan Greenblatt, thank you so much for your insight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And when we come back, the global shock after the Capitol was ransacked by Americans. Has this tarnished our image abroad for good? The COVID crisis is only getting worse. For the first time, we have crossed more than 4,000 dead in just 24 hours as that mutant super COVID strain is detected in even more places. But up next, so many calling out what appears to be a racial double standard with how law enforcement handled yesterday's riot. We take a closer look.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know seems to change, well, like every day. So what is it that you really need to know, want to know, to help you not just get through your day, but make the most of it? Feel smarter, feel better, feel happier. Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon? GMA 3, what you need to know. It's all about you. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. This is going to be so good.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. You will not replace us! Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown Hate, The War Among Us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
What you're seeing right now, this is part of the eye wall. This procession of migrants goes back 2 miles.
There is going to be catastrophic damage.
This fire has made a run. You can see those flames shooting up into the sky.
We are on the jam-packed red carpet.
Let's do it right, guys.
So this is the 4th weekend of protest.
Watch ABC News on location for Facebook Watch.
Your mom said, comb your hair. Your dad told you, smarten up. Your dog is judging you right now. And your best friend just called you crazy. We all need someone who'll pull no punches and give it to us straight. Now, imagine getting your news like that. No bull, no spin, just give it to me straight. Straightforward news, straight to the heart of the story. ABC News, straightforward.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. So if you like getting behind the biggest news stories of the day, inside all the details, the backstory, and what will happen next, then listen to Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. It's like no other news podcast out there. Even the critics agree. Listen free on Apple Podcasts.
Welcome back. With so much chaos and confusion yesterday, we wanted to take a step back and look at exactly how the day unfolded, how the halls of Congress were overrun so easily, and with that renewed scrutiny over how police responded to the rioters compared to so many troubling scenes in our nation's streets in recent months. Here's ABC's Juju Chang.
When the day dawned in D.C., the nation expected a very different kind of drama to play out, with some Republicans planning to object to the Electoral College vote count. By mid-morning, thousands of Trump supporters were gathering for a so-called Save America march, not far from the White House. There to protest President Trump's November election defeat, just 14 days before Joe Biden's inauguration. At noon, the president took to the stage, fueling the fire of anger and dissent.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen.
He called on Congress to reject the election results, an election he lost by 7 million votes, but continues to call rigged, despite zero evidence.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol. You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Meanwhile, at the Capitol, armed crowds gathered, and police were grossly underprepared for what was about to happen, despite the known threats posed by some protesters.
Madam Speaker, the Vice President and the United States Senate.
By 1:30, the House and Senate broke off to debate separately after GOP Representative Paul Gosar and Texas Senator Ted Cruz objected to Arizona's electoral college votes for Joe Biden.
I rise up for myself and 60 of my colleagues to object to the counting of the electoral ballots from Arizona.
On the Senate side, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell bluntly confronted his Republican colleagues.
The voters, the courts, and the states have all spoken. If we overrule them, it would damage our republic forever.
As debate continued outside, President Trump supporters were arriving, and the mood had distinctly changed.
Stop the steal! Stop the steal!
Demonstrators soon climbing the walls and scaffolding, violently confronting law enforcement.
It was clear that the crowd was intent on causing harm to our officers by deploying chemical irritants on police.
While inside, the vice president was whisked away by the Secret Service. As the mob moved in, the entire Capitol went into lockdown. But protesters were already inside, some carrying Confederate flags. The law enforcement presence was no match for the sheer size of the invasion, and now many facing criticism as images of them showing little resistance are emerging. This man taking a selfie with a Capitol police officer as other police stand nearby. In the House chamber, lawmakers huddled in the balcony as armed security barricaded the door. At one point, shots fired. A protester hit. She eventually dies.
They brought out a woman on a stretcher, rushed her inside. We did see blood gushing.
And there's now smoke coming from over by the House gallery.
For hours, while his supporters rampaged through the Capitol, breaking onto the Senate floor, into Nancy Pelosi's office, the president said nothing. By 4 o'clock, President-elect Biden publicly called on Trump to stop the mob.
I call on President Trump to go on national television now to fulfill his oath and defend the Constitution and demand an end to this siege.
Minutes later, Trump released a video statement full of lies about the election, but telling them to go home. It was eventually taken down from all social media sites.
I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special.
We love you. You are special. Those were the words of the president about the people that had just stormed the Capitol building. So a very strange turn of events.
By 5 o'clock, law enforcement had started reclaiming control of some parts of the Capitol grounds. Multiple sources telling ABC News President Trump repeatedly refused to send in the National Guard before finally agreeing in the late afternoon. 6 o'clock, a citywide curfew ordered by the mayor went into effect. A total of just 14 arrests by Capitol Police, 13 for suspected unlawful entry into the Capitol. D.C. police saying they carried out 26 arrests on Capitol grounds. But much of the Trump-supporting mob simply walked away. A stark contrast from the past summer in Lafayette Park, where largely peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters were met with a military show of force. Physical confrontations. Heavily armed and armored National Guardsmen lined up on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. The double standard on how law enforcement responded glaringly apparent, and not only in the nation's capital. Over the summer in Kenosha, police officers at a protest over the police shooting of Jacob Blake gave armed white teenager Kyle Rittenhouse water. He later shot and killed 2 people. His lawyers say it was self-defense. NBA players had protested Blake's shooting last summer by walking off the court. And again last night, dismayed by the perpetual double standard when it comes to police response, the Boston Celtics and Miami Heat walking off the court before the game. teams issuing a joint statement before returning to play, saying the drastic difference between the way protesters this past spring and summer were treated and the encouragement given to today's protesters who acted illegally just shows how much more work we have to do.
Our thanks to Juju. And joining us now is Rachel Scott inside the Capitol building. She was there at yesterday's riot and also Lafayette Square and several other major Black Lives Matter protests over the summer. Rachel, can you compare for us the major differences between what you saw with how police handled yesterday versus some of the events over the summer?
Well, Lindsay, the size of the demonstrations were similar, but the response was completely different. We saw law enforcement here at the U.S. Capitol yesterday just completely overwhelmed. When we were on the air together just this past summer, as protesters took to these very same streets, protesting and demanding for racial equality in this country, we saw a massive law enforcement presence. We saw National Guard suited and armored up, ready to go. The entire perimeter around the White House was fenced off, and then you had that one day where the president decided to take a walk over to St. John's Church. That area completely cleared, peaceful protesters forcibly removed. So tonight, so many are asking, what if those protesters and rioters here on the Capitol yesterday had been Black? Many say that the outcome would have been totally different, Lindsay.
Different entirely, we can imagine. Rachel Scott, our thanks to you.
Thanks.
And here on, is there at least a glimmer of hope in the latest economic numbers? And we take a look at the remarkable career of the next potential Attorney General by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day, a blistering statement from Michelle Obama. Part of her statement reads, "And for those who call others unpatriotic for simply taking a knee in silent protest, for those who wonder why we need to be reminded that Black lives matter at all, yesterday made it painfully clear that certain Americans are in fact allowed to denigrate the flag and symbols of our nation. They've just got to look the right way."
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
This is GMA3, what you need to know. GMA3.
A third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon.
It's all about you. Lunchtime on ABC.
Welcome back, everybody. Now we take a closer look by the numbers at Biden's nomination of Judge Merrick Garland for U.S. Attorney General. He could soon be leading the investigation into the siege on the Capitol, deciding whether to pursue prosecutions of Trump, reimagining racial justice, and so much more. For 23 years, Garland has been a federal judge in the nation's second highest court, the Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. Before that, he served 8 years in the Justice Department that he's now poised to lead. Comprised of more than 113,000 federal employees, the DOJ has been at the epicenter of countless controversies during the Trump administration and has been the target of repeated attacks by Trump himself. In 1995, Garland led the Justice Department's response to the bombing of that Oklahoma City government building that killed 168 people and resulted in the execution of bomber Timothy McVeigh. And of course, many will remember Garland's 2016 nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court for a record-setting 293 days. Senate Republicans refused to hold confirmation hearings. They said because it was an election year. But when Judge Amy Coney Barrett was nominated just 35 days before an election, the Senate confirmed her to the Supreme Court in record time. And we still have lots to get to here on Prime tonight. How hard will what happened yesterday make it for our nation to talk about the benefits of democracy to other nations? You won't believe how long some patients in LA are waiting in ambulances before they can be seen in an ER. And we now have a new world's richest man, at least for today. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline. Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime. Cinematic. Real-life drama. Stunning. The unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
Like all Americans, I am outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem.
The president caused this. The president is unfit, and the president is unwell.
Growing calls from leaders from both parties to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove Trump from office just 13 days before his term expires.
A very dangerous person who should not continue in office.
He may have only 13 days left as president, but yesterday demonstrated that each and every one of those days is a threat to democracy so long as he is in power.
Senator Schumer says that if Vice President Pence refuses to take action or the cabinet members decide not to vote to force the president out, Congress should reconvene immediately to impeach President Trump.
Former attorney Bill Barr spoke out against his former boss and the violence, saying, quote, the president's conduct yesterday was a betrayal of his office and supporters.
Meanwhile, more top White House officials are being added to a growing list of resignations.
Moments ago, we learned that Tyler Goodspeed, the acting chairman of the White House Council of Economic Advisors, will step down, and so is that woman. Elaine Chao says she's going to leave her post as transportation secretary. Special envoy to Northern Ireland and former White House chief of staff Mick Mulvaney says he is also leaving, and the president's deputy national security advisor and China expert extraordinaire Matt Pottinger also resigned.
And so has the chief of staff for Melania Trump and former press secretary to the president Stephanie Grisham, as well as the White House special social secretary Ricky Nacita and White House deputy press secretary Sarah Matthews.
Facebook and Instagram are blocking the president's accounts indefinitely.
In a post by Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg, he says the shocking events of the last 24 hours show that President Trump intends to use his remaining time in office to undermine a peaceful and lawful transition of power, and that Facebook will extend the block it has placed on Trump's accounts indefinitely and at least for the next 2 weeks until the peaceful transition of power is complete.
The latest jobs numbers show the coronavirus is still taking a toll on the labor market.
There were 787,000 new unemployment claims last week. It's slightly less than the prior week, but jobless claims are stuck at historically high levels while the pandemic rages and businesses and consumers pull back. A fuller look at the economic consequences of the virus comes Friday when the Labor Department publishes its monthly unemployment report. Economists expect it'll show jobs were created at a much slower rate than in November.
Tesla's Elon Musk is now the richest person in the world. With a net worth above $185 billion, Musk unseated Amazon's Jeff Bezos, who was worth about $184 billion. Musk began 2020 worth about $27 billion, but the rise in Tesla's stock propelled him to the top spot.
My love of baseball came probably when I was around 2 or 3.
Smith making history. The 29-year-old speaking on her historic hiring as a minor league coach by the Red Sox, becoming the first Black woman to become a professional baseball coach.
I'm happy if my story can inspire, other women of color, other people of color, really anybody. I don't want to put limits on it. If anybody is inspired by this story, then even better.
Baseball isn't her only love. Smith grew up playing soccer, then turned to softball before falling in love with baseball while playing for Dartmouth.
My mom introduced me to the game, but I have to give credit to those movies that came out in the 90s. So Rookie of the Year, Sandlot, Angels in the Outfield. I saw those and that continued my love of the game.
A day in U.S. history that has left our allies in shock as our adversaries may rejoice. But how detrimental is this for America's image as the bastion of democracy? Joining us now to discuss this, along with more reactions from around the globe, is senior foreign correspondent Ian Pannell. Ian, you've traveled the world covering wars and uprisings. How harmful was this for the United States' reputation as the ultimate example of democracy across the world?
Well, I think, first of all, many people will now
be contentious towards that assertion that the US is an example, that it is a bastion. People are going to say, well, hang around, you want us to follow your example, look what happened there. I just want to show you a couple of the front pages here in the UK, and I think that answers your question. Anarchy in the USA. And that's what people are seeing, that's what people are thinking, and I think there is a sense of shock and horror. And front pages around the world, whatever language, whatever continent you're on, this was front page news. Bear in mind, here in the UK, over 1,000 people just died from coronavirus in one day. That's a huge number for a relatively small country, and yet it was the events in the United States that dominated the headlines. And we've seen reaction from a lot of close friends and close allies of the US, some with abject horror, and a lot of them directly blaming President Trump. I just want to read you this particular tweet from Angela Merkel, who of course is the German Chancellor. She said, "These images made me furious and also sad. I regret very much that President Trump since November has not conceded his defeat, and not yesterday either. Doubt about the outcome of the election was stoked." And I think that is the sentiment from many people who absolutely support the United States, they like the United States, but were horrified, and that will lead them to question their relationship and how powerful, what kind of impact US foreign policy can have going forward.
And talk to us, if you would, about both the reaction of our adversaries in other countries that you found to be surprising. How large, what's the magnitude of this impact?
I think the biggest surprise is how quickly everybody reacted. I mean, last night, everybody, of course, was glued to Twitter and glued to their TV screens, watching ABC News and other networks. But I think people were genuinely surprised by how quickly everybody responded. We haven't seen any official reaction from the Russians. That's partly because it's Orthodox Christmas on Thursday. But around the world, from China to Iran to Venezuela, countries that have been antithetical towards the United States, or countries that the United States has set itself against, have reacted strongly. I want to read you this one particular comment from the Iranian president, Hassan Rouhani. He said, "What we saw last night and today in America firstly prove what a failure the Western democracy is and how fragile and weak its foundation is." In other words, the events that were allowed to happen on the ground are now being used as a stick to beat back the United States and its influence around the world.
The U.S., as you know, has a long history of getting involved in other nations' elections and democratic movements. Do you think now that other countries might think twice before calling on the U.S. to serve as a support?
Yeah, that's right. Getting involved, not always welcome to get involved. But I think the biggest problem for democratic movements, in particular two movements which are underway right now, which we've covered, and the leaders that we've spoken to in Hong Kong and in Belarus, their people have taken to the streets and they have looked towards the United States. I've seen people in crowds in Hong Kong waving the stars and stripes, saying they want American support, they want American backing, looking to President Trump and others to give them not physical support, but at least moral support. They're seeing America, as you said earlier, as that beacon on the hill, as that shining example of what they want to achieve at home. It's now much, much harder for those movements to try and draw succor from the United States because their detractors, whether it's Alexander Lukashenko, the authoritarian ruler of Belarus, or the Chinese government, will say, "You're trying to align yourselves with this version of democracy. We don't want this here." And it discredits those very movements and people on the streets who are risking their lives to bring about the kind of democratic change that, unfortunately, we've all taken too much for granted.
Right, really sad, the large impact of a small population, really. Ian, panel, thank you so much. Now to the other crisis in our country. More than 4,000 people lost their lives from COVID in just the last 24 hours, and the danger only continues to grow. That mutant COVID strain has now spread even more widely. Kaylee Hartung has more.
Tonight, for the first time since the pandemic began, more than 4,000 deaths confirmed in just 24 hours. And now new signs infections will only grow. That highly contagious variant of the virus now found in 8 states, including Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and Texas today. Paramedics in Southern California say hospitals already look like war zones. We rode along with EMTs in Los Angeles, where ambulances are waiting up to 17 hours outside hospitals and running out of oxygen for their patients.
They literally had the oxygen tubing and had a connector so that 2 patients were using basically the same oxygen flow at the same time. So resources are really low.
Because that was your best option.
That was the only option.
Exhausted crews working around the clock telling us they feel helpless.
I saw a beautiful 95-year-old woman who was in pain lying in the back of an ambulance for 12 hours. There was absolutely nothing we could do to get her into that hospital because there was no more room in the hospital.
Just disastrous situations playing out in those hospitals there. Kaylee Hartung joins us now. And Kaylee, take us back to the front lines with you. You've been covering this crisis now from the very beginning for us. While we've been watching these scenes play out in Washington, tell us more about the scenes of desperation playing out there in California.
Well, Lindsay, I spoke to one man who's been in EMS for more than 30 years. He said he was deployed to Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Rita. But what's going on in LA County right now, this is the worst disaster he's ever been involved in. You hear so many stories from these men and women that just make your heart skip a beat. I spoke with one EMT, Brandon Gray, who told me he was on his 57th hour of a 60-hour shift when I was talking to him, but he spent 17 of those hours in his ambulance with one semi-critical patient, just waiting to get her a bed. You think about those long wait lines, those parking lots just stacked up with ambulances. They pull into those parking lots not knowing how long they will have to wait, not knowing what to tell their patients in those moments. And if you think about the role of an EMT, they're not doctors. They are trying to transport that patient from a moment of trauma, from a moment of desperation to get them safely into the hospital, and they have no other choice in so many scenarios but to wait. We hear these extreme numbers and they're so hard to wrap your mind around, but Lindsay, the average in and of itself, they say 5, 6, 7 ambulances at any given time are stacked up in a parking lot and they're waiting a minimum of 3 hours. It's just hard to wrap your mind around, and every day, every hour, through the day and night, that's what paramedics are dealing with right here in LA County.
Really, as you said, hard to wrap your mind around it all. Kaylee Hartung, thank you. Before we go tonight, our image of the day, and it happened in the early morning hours. Democracy prevailing over mob rule as Congress officially ratified the fair election of Joe Biden, the next president of the United States. That is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us, and good night.